My son and I play a game when we're at the Right Stuff working out, because there's always playing music up above, usually from a long time ago, and we play the who did that song game. Do you know who was singing that song that we were just listening to at halftime there? Anybody? Anybody? Nobody knows that song? Wait, Jeff is our worship leader. We pay you to know this stuff. Oh, there we go. Yes, throw her under the bus. That was Big Daddy Weave, just so you know. Yeah, so go look that up. Next week, like Vince mentioned, we're going to have the Gideon speaker here. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh, this is going to be some really, really old guy, and he's going to be really, really boring. And so maybe this is a morning to stay over at Pete's Coffee. I really encourage you not to do that. I will be here, by the way, although it is going to be our 35th, is that right, wedding anniversary. There's my wife. Yes, thank you very much. 35th wedding anniversary next Sunday, so we're looking forward to that. Thank you. But so I'll be here, but I have been promised that we're going to get one of the best Gideon speakers that they have. This is their national conferences in San Jose. I'm going to go to one of their national meetings on Friday night. But they have, if you've had a chance to listen to one of the really good Gideon speakers, you know you will hear story after story after story of how God has used the Bible to change people's lives. They place the Bibles in hotels, they take Bibles to prisons, they put them in schools, and I've heard some of these stories from some of these guys, and it's just amazing. So I really encourage you. I think it'll be really a fun Sunday morning next Sunday. Well, I saw an article earlier this year that helped explain to me why it is that so many of us feel like we are, as you see in the series, we're running on empty. We're just kind of flat out of energy. Here's the explanation the author came up with. He says there are 318 million people in our country. When you take out people who are too young to work, who aren't able to work, you're left with about 200 million people to do all the work. 84 million are retired, so that leaves 116 million to do the work. There are about 75 million people in school, leaves about 41 million to do all the work. Of those, 22 million are employed by the federal government, which leaves 15 million to do the work. Take from that total the 14,800,000 who work for the city and state governments, that leaves 200,000 people to do all the work. There are 188,000 people in hospitals, leaves 12,000 to do the work. There are 11,998 people in prison, which leaves just 2 people to do the work. You and me, and at the moment, you're just sitting there listening to me do all the work. No wonder I am so tired. I don't know, have you ever felt like that? Like you were the only person who was really pulling your weight, like it was all up to you to clean everybody else's mess up? Ever thought that the real problem in your life is that you just can't get anybody to help you? You know, we've all felt that like that. We've all felt that way at home, like everybody else is off doing their thing and we're left alone to do the dishes and wash the clothes and pick up the toys and make the beds. We felt like that way, like that at work, like we're the only one there. Everybody else has gone home to be with family or to watch their favorite shows. We felt like that at church sometimes too, like we're the only ones who are doing all the stuff that needs to get done. And it doesn't take long before we feel like we are running on empty, before all the juices dry up and we feel like we're left with cotton mouth of the soul. But there have also been times in our lives when we've worked harder and longer and all alone, and it hasn't worn us out a bit. In fact, it has energized us. There have been times we've worked without sleep, and yet we've never been so satisfied, never been so full of joy in our lives. Now, last weekend, Brenda and I went to see the movie Inside Out. Any of you guys seen that movie? Kind of a fun movie. And one of the things that struck me in that movie was the part where they have the memories that are being dumped away. They're saying all these people don't need these memories. They don't need to know these facts anymore. And I was thinking, man, I hope that doesn't happen to me. I mean, I know it will, but I don't want to let go of some of those memories. So this last week, I've been a little bit nostalgic, and so I want to share a couple stories with you this morning that are some of my favorite memories in life. One of the best days of my life, June 16th, 1990. It was 25 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was also one of the most exhausting days of my life. I hadn't had more than a few hours of sleep for the last prior 3 days. The night before, I was up almost the entire night working around our house. I vacuumed the entire house. I did the laundry. I went grocery shopping in the middle of the night. In fact, I did everything that night by myself because Brenda, as I'll explain in just a moment, had a good reason for not being there, and she wasn't around to help me. Besides grocery shopping, I'd also gone out that evening to do some birthday shopping because it was Stephanie's 3rd birthday that was coming up. I wrapped her presents by myself. That's not something to be proud of. I decorated the house in a Minnie Mouse motif. I didn't have a lot of decorations, but we had some Minnie Mouse beach towels that I could put up. Washed the bathroom and kitchen floors, set out the tableware. I'm sure it was plastic something or other. And as I thought back about it, I didn't spend a single minute doing anything for myself. But when I woke up on June 16th, 1990, after about an hour of sleep, I could not have been happier or more excited or more energized. I got in my car, drove over to my in-laws' house, picked up Stephanie, who had spent the night with Grandma and Papa. We got in the car, and we put on the Sesame Street Happy Birthday tape and sang along with Bert and Ernie and the gang. I should have Stephanie come up and sing this with me. A very unhappy birthday to you. May none of your birthday wishes come true. May the presents that you get make you angry and upset. A very unhappy birthday to you. Well, anyway, thank you. This was a special day because it was Steph's 3rd birthday, and it was also the day we were bringing home from the hospital her mom and her new baby brother, Ryan, all of 2 days old. And that one picture you see up there on the right-hand side of her in the little pigtails, that's the picture that Brenda put inside Ryan's, was it bassinet, is that what we call it? So that she would recognize his sister when he came home. Well, the rest of the day was actually even crazier and busier than the days before because we had a bunch of company come over to help celebrate Stephanie's birthday, to see the new baby. The whole day, quite obviously, Brenda didn't do a thing to help. I mean, of course not. The thought never entered my mind. It wouldn't have entered yours either. I mean, why isn't she helping me? I mean, she just had given birth to a very large person. But you wouldn't have thought that either. You wouldn't have been exhausted because your whole focus for that time would have been on bringing joy to some other people. You wouldn't have been the least bit concerned about what they could do for you. All you would care about is what you could do to make them feel better, to help them feel comfortable, to help them celebrate, to make them feel special and to feel loved. And even though you hadn't slept and were exhausted, would you have been running on empty? No, not at all. Your cup of joy would be full and running over. And you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've all been through that sort of experience. There is a joy, the Bible tells us, that we experience from helping other people succeed. There's a joy that comes from putting other people's goals and dreams ahead of ours. There's a joy that comes from watching your husband or your wife get their degree, a degree that they never could have earned if you hadn't put your life on the back burner for a few years. There's a joy from watching a friend pass a test he never would have passed if you hadn't sacrificed your time to help him study. We have all had those experiences. We have all known the joy of helping our friends and helping our loved ones succeed. But here's the thing, right now, on July 19th, we're running on empty. We are out of joy. We are tired and blurry-eyed and stiff and sore. If we have to do one more thing for somebody else, we're going to scream. And we wonder, when is it my turn? When do I get to put my feet up on the couch and relax? When do I get to control the remote and watch what I want to watch? You know, during this series we call Running on Empty, we are participating in a recovery program of sorts. We are trying to recover joy. And the truth is that to recover joy, some of us might need a break. Those of you who've been at Reliant Camp all week, a week of serving the needs of other people, it might be time this afternoon to put your feet up on the couch and to take a break. And you might be one of those people. But the truth is also this. For many of us, the key to rediscovering joy is not to take a break from serving, but to tweak our serving technique. Let me try to explain what I mean when I say that, that we need to tweak our serving technique. This is one of those things that I have learned over the years from my nights of insomnia when I go and watch TV, and the best things that are on are infomercials. I particularly enjoy watching exercise infomercials to see the latest and greatest exercise programs. Mind you, I've never ordered one of those programs, but at least I know what I could do if I actually wanted to get into shape. And there are a ton of these programs out there. Let me just name some of them for you. Some of you I know practice these things. There's Insanity, P90X, Focus T25, P90X times 2, Turbo Fire. They got such great names for these things. Body Beast, Six-Pack Shortcuts, Hip Hop Abs. Anybody admitting to doing? No, I won't ask you to raise your hands. Thrive 90, Slim in 6, and on it goes. One of my favorites over the years, at least favorite infomercials, is a guy, he's still on TV, but not as much anymore. His name is Tony Little. Anybody remember Tony Little, the pigtailed guy? If you go to his website, he still has a website, and you can see him demonstrate his programs. Here's the sort of thing that you'll see and hear from him. First, he'll show somebody doing a traditional sit-up. As the person does a sit-up, he will point out two things. Tony will. He'll point out, first of all, how much the person is straining to do this sit-up, how much effort and energy it's taking, and then he points out something that's more important. He will point out that the traditional sit-up actually doesn't do for us what we want it to do. We want the sit-up to strengthen our abdominals, but in fact, it causes, he says, more strain to the back. I don't do these exercises anyway, so I wouldn't know. But he says, in fact, it causes more strain to the back than it adds strength to the stomach. He will then bring out his latest gadget called the Ab Rider Plus that you can get for $99.99. 3 easy payments as of this morning. I looked it up. So then Tony will have his volunteer hop on the Ab Rider Plus and start using this machine. And without probing from Tony, the volunteer will offer that the exercise doesn't strain his back at all, and it seems to be easier overall, and that he can feel it actually working his abs. And then Tony will turn to the camera, and he will say this. He will actually kind of shout it, but I won't do that. He will say, do you know what the difference is? It's technique. Technique. Now, I've always found Tony Little to be a little bit obnoxious. But there's actually, I think, a lesson to be learned from this. If you work out at the gym much, you probably have seen this happen. You will see two people doing the same exercise. You'll see one person who you know is doing it all wrong, and another person who is doing it right. And the person who's doing it wrong, you also notice pretty soon their shoulder is hurting. Also, you notice that pretty soon that person isn't coming back to the gym anymore because they're not getting the results. They're more likely to burn out on their exercise quickly because they're using the wrong technique. And I think the same thing happens to us. Take two people, put them side by side. One person works hard to help people be successful. One person is just a real servant and has so much fun doing it that he never complains, wants to keep doing it, can't contain his joy. The other person works just as hard to help other people and to be a servant, but he's so tired and bruised and beat up, he doesn't want to ever lift another finger for anybody but himself again. What's the difference? Maybe it's the technique. So what do we need to do? We need to tweak our technique, to change our attitude just a little bit to make serving a source of joy instead of a cause of burnout. And once again, let's see what the Apostle Paul has to teach us from the book of Philippians, the book we're studying this summer. This short letter that Paul wrote from prison in Rome to the Christians in Philippi. Here's how Paul begins the second chapter of the book of Philippians. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. In those 4 verses, Paul suggests 2 ways, I think, to tweak our technique so we can find more joy in serving other people. Step 1, he suggests, is to make better friends. And a second step he suggests in verses 3 and 4, is to make your friends better. Make better friends, make your friends better. Now, what do I mean when I say that the key to finding joy in making others successful is to make better friends? Well, think of it this way. Who do you most enjoy helping out? Who do you most enjoy helping to be successful? I mean, isn't it true that there are some people in your life that you never get tired of serving? Certain people you just love to help. And isn't it also true that there are certain people that, frankly, are a real drain on you, who wear you out and dry you up real quickly? So who are the people you enjoy helping? Well, if you're like me, there are two categories of people. There's your family, and then there are the people that you consider to be your better friends. We don't get tired of helping our grandkids, for example, learn to walk or to talk or to read, do we? We find great joy in helping our own kids to be successful. And we don't get tired of helping our better friends. We don't keep track of how many times we've helped them move or how much pizza they've had at our house. We enjoy helping our friends. We're energized by by doing what we can to serve them. And then there are other people, and they just sap the life out of us, right? They leave us wrung dry. So what do we do about those people? After all, there seem to be a number of them in our lives, right? Do we just let their calls go to voicemail and pretend that we never got the call? Just delete their text when they say, hey, can you come over and help me move? Paul suggests a different approach. Tweak your technique, he says. And here's how to do it. Make better friends. Look again at these first couple of verses in Philippians 2. And then we'll see if we can explain what he's talking about here. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by what? By being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. What Paul is telling the Philippians, who apparently are having some issues getting along with each other, is this. Guys, look at all you have in common. You're all followers of Jesus. You're all headed in the same direction. You've all experienced the comfort of being loved by him. You all have God's Spirit living inside you. You've all been tenderized by God's grace. So instead of focusing on your differences, focus on what you share in common. Now, I worked as a lawyer for about 15 years, and I had the chance at one of my law firms I worked at in Palo Alto to have lunch with one of the most successful attorneys in the Silicon Valley. And at the time, he was one of the most successful, and he is to this day. I looked up his numbers this last week. He's done like $75 billion worth of deals in the last few years. So he's just an incredible guy. People continue to knock down his door to get him to take to work for him. And at lunch, he shared with me and a couple other guys, a couple other young attorneys who were having lunch with him that day, what the secret to his success was. And we thought it was going to be something more technical or something about, how to go out and drum up business. But here's what he said. He said the first thing he focuses on when he meets a potential client is how to become that client's friend. He says, I look for what we have in common, and then I try to build on that. He says, instead of trying to impress the client with how smart I am and with what I've done in the past, I work at building a friendship with the person. And he says the biggest advantage to this approach is that I only do work for friends. So when he's working at midnight on some deal, he says, I'm not just working for a client, I'm working for a friend. I'm working to help a friend be successful. And the result for him is that in addition to making a lot of money, he has a lot of fun doing his job. It doesn't burn him out. It energizes him because he took the time to first make better friends. The church at Philippi apparently had some people problems. They were tired of each other. They were getting on each other's nerves. I don't know if you've ever had a pinched nerve in your neck. It can be fairly disconcerting, especially if you don't know what it is. It can feel something like maybe you're having a heart attack or something because you get a pain in your chest and you get a pain shooting down your arm. I had a pinched nerve once a few years ago. I thought at first there was something seriously wrong with me. Went to the doctors, and they said, you know what? You just need to go to the chiropractor and get adjusted. I didn't need surgery. I didn't need medication. I just needed, in layman's terms, to get tweaked. And in less than a couple weeks, my pain was gone. I had more energy. I was in a better state of mind. To a bunch of people who were getting on each other's nerves, who were dealing with people who to them were a pain in the neck, Paul says, look, tweak your technique. You can relieve the pressure and the stress and the aggravation of serving people if you take the time and you make the effort to make better friends. Focus on what you have in common with these people and build on that. You will find a whole lot more joy. You'll find it a whole lot more energizing to help other people be successful if the people you are helping are your better friends. So make better friends. Paul's second suggestion is this: make your friends better. Here's how the way Paul explains it again back in Philippians 2. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. In humility, consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. And this is the passage that we saw on the screen earlier today. Who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and he became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Jesus had one purpose in his life here on earth: to save us from our sin and to make us better. He didn't come to earth to make a name for himself. His purpose was not to accumulate wealth or to become famous or to impress people with his knowledge and his power. His purpose was to make us better, to rescue us from the things that drag us down, to rescue us from our sin and from our guilt and from our shame, to empower us to live life at a higher level. Now those verses 6 to 11 of Philippians 2, by the way, was a hymn sung by the early church. Paul is simply doing here in this passage what I will do if I quote Big Daddy Weave or a Chris Tomlin song in a message. He was taking a well-known and loved song and using it to illustrate a point. And the words of this song are as powerful as any song that we've ever heard or sung. Notice how it goes. It tells us that Jesus is God himself. His nature is the very nature of God. And yet Jesus did not cling to his rights and privileges and powers as God. He didn't grab onto them and hold on to them for dear life. Instead, like a trapeze artist who lets go of the bar, Jesus let go of those rights and privileges. And he became one of us. He became a man. Instead of looking out for his own interests, Paul says, this hymn says, he committed his life to looking out for our interests. He committed his life to serving us. He served us even though he knew there was only one way ultimately that he could make us better, one way that he could rescue us from our sin, and that was by dying. He knew the only way to rescue us from sin's penalty and from sin's power was to die for our sins on the cross. He knew that when he let go of the trapeze bar, there was going to be no net to catch him. No person there to reach out his hand to grab him and to keep him from falling. But Jesus let go anyway, the hymn tells us. He let go of the God bar in order to make us better. And in doing so, he fell to his death on a cross. But here's the thing. When we sing that hymn, when the church sang that hymn, there's no way they would sing that in a minor key. This is not a typical country song about the girl that broke my heart and ran off with my 18-wheeler and left me drowning in the tracks of my tears. This is a song of celebration and victory. Jesus did not give up his life grudgingly. Yes, of course it was hard for him to sacrifice his life. We see that in his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. Yes, it was painful. But don't think for a minute that Jesus didn't find great joy and satisfaction in making his friends, and if you remember from John 15, that's what he says he calls us now, making his friends better. Parents, do you remember teaching your kids how to ride a bike? Some kids pick it up right off the bat. Some kids take a few weeks or more to get comfortable on the two-wheelers. So what do you as a parent do? You put them on the bike, and then first you walk alongside them, kind of holding them up, and then as they get going a little faster, you got to run alongside them to keep them from falling. Then there's the whole psychology of the process, because for most kids, learning to ride a bike is as much a head thing as it is a physical thing. And then that day finally comes. You're running along with your child with your hand on the bike to keep them from falling. Your wife is in the back watching you, and then when you get far enough away so you figure I can't hear her yelling at me anymore, you let go of the bike. And lo and behold, your child is riding. And what do you do when you discover, when you see this moment, this great triumph? I mean, you will stop in the middle of the street, and you'll pump your fist, you'll throw your hands up, and you'll cheer. You're so excited that you were able to help your child learn how to do this. You celebrate. For any parent, I think that's one of the great moments of life. Jesus gave his life to make us better, to save us from our sin, to bring us peace and joy and fulfillment, to empower us to be all that God designed us to be. And we cannot imagine the joy that brings him. No one knows the joy of making friends better than Jesus. When Jesus sees that because of his sacrifice, your broken heart is made whole again, he sticks his fist in the air and he shouts. Now, I mentioned that Dave and Karen got married last night. And I just as the time came for their wedding, I was thinking about that. I mean, it's a couple who in their lives have gone through some really hard things, and now God has brought them together. It's just a great relationship. And I was just imagining Jesus cheering at the wedding last night for Dave and Karen and thinking, man, you know, I've helped them to recover their lives and put their brokenness back together again and brought them together and allowed them to experience joy and happiness again. And I think Jesus would tell us, look, if you want your heart to beat fast with joy, if you want to rediscover the fun of being alive, then have the same attitude as Jesus. Let go of the bar. Let go of all your rights and your privileges that you've gripped on to so tightly for so long, and focus your energy on making your friends better. I said I got a little nostalgic this last week, and I told you one of my favorite memories. I'm going to tell you one more to close this morning. It's from, here's sort of the background. When I turned 40, 20 years ago, to celebrate, some of us went to climb Half Dome, 7 of us from Cornerstone. When I turned 50, I said I want my family to climb Half Dome with me, so 10 years ago we did that. Now that I'm 60, and so to celebrate turning 60, I'm going to talk about climbing Half Dome when I was 40. I had to look up some of the statistics. Half Dome, you know, in Yosemite Valley stands 8,842 feet high, about 5,000 feet above the valley floor. The hike up Half Dome is about 8 miles long. The last 500 feet of the journey is a climb that's nearly straight up these 2 cables. And it turned out that when the 7 of us went 20 years ago, climbing Half Dome was only one of the 3 challenges that we had. Another one of those challenges was of making better friends. Because each of the 7 of us, we didn't really know each other all that well at the time, and we were all very different. Jim, I think you probably remember some of the guys in our group. We took 2 cars up, and I remember in our car, I think we argued the whole way up because our politics were just very, very different. And it turns out our theology was different on some things and stuff too. And as we got to know each other better, we discovered almost everything was different. Our taste in food, our taste in music, and all that stuff. So spending 3 days together in that sort of situation, sharing a tent cabin together, could have been a fairly painful time. We could have spent the majority of our time arguing with each other and thinking ill of each other. But, you know, the more we talked, as it turned out, the more we found out we had in common. Sure, we had different jobs and different hobbies, but we didn't focus on that. We focused on what we had in common. We discovered that as different as we were, we had common insecurities and some common dreams, some common fears and common heartbreaks from our past, common questions about life and death and faith. And we had at the center a common hope. All 7 of us were followers of Jesus, although we came from very different religious backgrounds. And we had in common our commitment to loving him and obeying him. And as we focused on what we had in common, we became better friends. And then we had another challenge, and that was a challenge of making our friends better. We had ample opportunity on this 3-day trip to choose between clinging to our own rights and letting go of our rights to serve each other. For example, a couple of the guys, 2 of the guys, forgot to bring any water with them for this hike. Those of us who did remember to bring water, all right, first after we made fun of them, but we could have said, look, I'm holding on to my water. I was smart enough to remember to bring water. I bought the water. I've been carrying the water up. Get your own water. But we didn't do that. We all chipped in. We let go of our rights to our own water, and we shared with each other. Another one of our guys, the youngest guy, we're about a third way up a Half Dome. And he says, all right, I'm hungry. Where do we stop to get something to eat? What? You think there are like snack shacks and restaurants? There's a McDonald's at the top of Vernal Falls or something? So after we humiliated him for a little bit, but we could have all said, look, I've got my sandwich and my cookies and stuff that I've been carrying up, but we all chipped together and gave Jake something to eat. Jim remembers this very well, I'm sure. One of the guys was having a struggle going up, and so another one of our friends volunteered to carry his backpack all the way up to the top of Half Dome, instead of clinging to his right and saying, no, do it yourself. And then there were 2 of us that, at the end of the trip, kind of really were a challenge to the others, because 2 of us, myself included, had a hard time coming back Half Dome. I made it up there okay, but coming back, my toes are bleeding, and I twisted my ankle, and I was whiny, and and so the 2 of us are coming down much more slowly. The 5 of the other guys went on ahead a little bit more quickly. And then it's about 7 o'clock at night now, and it's getting dark. And it occurs to me that I remembered water, I remembered food. I did not remember a flashlight. Never thought we'd still be up there in the dark. And we're at the top, I think it's at the top of Vernal Falls, if I remember. There's a mist trail, and it's very steep coming down and very slippery. And it's, now almost completely dark. And I'm thinking, we're going to die right here. And then I see somebody carrying a flashlight coming up towards us. And one of the guys got sent back up to rescue us. And he brought the flashlight back. That was John Nelson, who's not here today, so I can't embarrass him. He's on a trip right now. And when I thought about it, John had every right in the world to go back to camp, take the shuttle back from the base of Yosemite, and take a shower and get something to eat and play cards while, those of us who were just slower for whatever reason made it on our own. But he didn't do that. He gave up his rights to a comfortable evening to truck back up part of Half Dome again to rescue us. And here's part of why I tell that story. That's very much what Jesus does for us. He calls himself the light of the world in John 8, right? When we were lost in the dark, Jesus came to rescue us. He came to bring us light and to lead us to safety. And here's the thing. Jesus has now passed that torch on to us. He's given us the flashlight, and he said to us, it's your turn. Remember in Matthew 5, Jesus says, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. It's your turn. You go help your friends. Bring them the light. They need you. And don't worry about what you have to give up, Jesus would tell us, because if you will do it, if you will give up your rights, if you'll have the same attitude as I had, you will find joy and fulfillment like you've never known before. And when you do that, when you sacrifice your own rights in order to help a friend who is lost in the dark, when you work hard to help a friend get up on his feet and find his balance, when you see a friend ride confidently into a new horizon of opportunity because of what you have done for him, then you will know the joy that fills the heart of Jesus, the joy of making friends better. Well, the band's going to come and lead us in a couple more songs, songs of worship and of surrender and of commitment. And as they do that, would you stand with me as we have a word of prayer? God, I thank you for this church of people. Thank you for these people who are my friends that I love so dearly. Thank you for their patience in sitting here and listening to me tell old stories of times when such special memories that I have. God, thank you that so many of these folks are part of my favorite memories in life. Thank you for the way that you have used them as my friends to help me succeed and to encourage me and to comfort me in times that have been hard. And Lord, I pray that we would become more and more a people who do that for each other, that we would find great joy in serving each other, and we'd find great joy in serving people who are beyond the walls of this church, people in our neighborhood, people who are at work, people we meet at Starbucks or at Pete's Coffee or wherever we go. God, thank you that you sent your son Jesus to come to this earth, that he became the servant of all of us to make us better, and that you've changed our lives. And now, Lord, I pray that you would empower us to go from this place to be the same kind of people, to people who live in darkness, that we would bring the light of the world to them. We pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.